Boruto is a bit of a weird IP. Not because it's a spin-off of one of the most popular manga of all time, or because it went from one of the most hated on stories in all of manga and anime to one of the most beloved ones. No, it's a bit of a weird story because the story begins with the end of the story. At least, we presume. See, because in Chapter 1, or Episode 1 of Boruto, we see a far-off future where Konoha is destroyed and Boruto is standing across from somebody who we don't know, about to enter into combat. And this character, who is definitely not immediately recognizable to us, says that he's gonna send Boruto where he sent Lord 8th, which led every single reader of Boruto to immediately wonder as to whether or not Naruto was gonna die in the story. And now, ever since the release of Chapter 1 or Episode 1 of Boruto, every single Boruto watcher or reader has been anticipating this moment coming to pass. A moment where Konoha is destroyed and Boruto and Kawaki have their final showdown. And as Kawaki activates his karma marking and Boruto activates his karma marking and his Jogan, this final battle can truly once and for all commence. But the longer the story goes, the less likely this event seems. See, well, yes, obviously Kawaki was introduced as a character, and yes, Boruto and Kawaki are on opposite sides of the battle currently. And yes, there is a team of incredibly powerful entities known as the Shinju who are currently trying to consume people inside of Konoha. However, whether it's the massive power disparity between Boruto and Kawaki, the complicated motivations of the Shinju, or the utter lack of Code's presence in Two Blue Vortex, this future where Konoha becomes completely destroyed and Boruto and Kawaki are able to enter into what would be fair and even combat just doesn't seem hugely likely. And I don't think it was ever supposed to seem hugely likely. See, Boruto is not only a weird IP because it showed us the end at the beginning, but it's also a weird IP because the first 52 chapters were not written by Kishimoto, but instead written by a man by the name of Ukyo Kodachi, the person who wrote Boruto the movie. And thus, while Kishimoto was technically executive producing all of the chapters that were being released by Kodachi, the story veered so far from what Kishimoto wanted that he decided to fire Kodachi and retake up the writing himself, which means that Kishimoto probably didn't agree with all of the creative choices of Kodachi, one of which very easily could have been how this story started. And to believe in the most recent chapter with the explanation of Kashin, Koji, Shinjutsu, the 10 paths, Kishimoto has carved out a way for himself to get out of the constraint of writing the story knowing it has to end at a certain point. As the future that we saw at the beginning of Chapter 1 or Episode 1 of Boruto could just be a future we avoided. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about the 10 Paths Shinjutsu and how it could be used to retcon certain events that happened in the first 52 chapters of Boruto. Because today we're talking Boruto's biggest retcon yet. But before we get to explaining possible retcons, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're feeling particularly generous, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. Or if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow my brand new channel that I created with Stephen He, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk about anime, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga. This week, it's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So in the earliest part of Boruto, we see that Konoha has been destroyed now for the third time. And at this point, if I'm living in Konoha, I'm moving. Yeah, Orochimaru only destroyed a part of it, but there was a guy who floated in the sky for about 2 minutes and was able to destroy the entire thing with one move. Now you're telling me 20 or so years later, after I've rebuilt my ramen shop for the second time, that I'm now gonna have to rebuild it again because the son of the guy that everybody was trying to kill the first time around not only killed the guy everybody was trying to kill, but came back to the village and then had his entire fight against all the people trying to kill him in my village? That's absurd. It's ridiculous. Stop doing it. However, for the life of me, as I see the events of Boruto unfold, nothing about Konoha being destroyed makes sense to me. And while it might sound weird to some of you, let me unpack it. See, well, obviously, yes, Chapter 13 ended on the 5th Shinju being created, and that 5th Shinju could either be Shinki or Baryon mode Naruto. Hey man, if anybody's gonna be able to destroy Konoha, it should be the Shinju, especially if they have Naruto on their side. However, while the Shinju do absolutely have the power to destroy Konoha. I mean, Juro alone, we've seen firing tailed beast bombs, and we know tailed beast bombs are more than enough to destroy a village. Tie that into the Moegi Shinju's wood release, Bug's ability to spar with Boruto, and just Hidari basically being Sasuke with 2 Rinnegan, and yeah, on an individual basis, probably every single one of the Shinju has enough power to destroy Konoha. However, rather interestingly, none of the Shinju seem to be motivated to destroy Konoha. See, because, well, yes, they're immensely powerful, all of the Shinju seem to act actively kind of detest violence. Well, maybe not detest violence. They kill everybody who gets in their way. But the Shinju are very straightforward in their desires. They have no egos or memories, and they're trying to consume the person that the claw grind bit to form them loved the most in order to gain an understanding of who they are. That means that every single one of the Shinju is hyper-focused on one person and one person alone. And now, while unfortunately all of those people tie their roots back to Konoha, unless of course the fifth Shinju is actually Shinki, and then Shinki might actually want to consume Garo, which would allow for some world building outside of Konoha. This doesn't necessarily mean that the Shinju are going to destroy all of Konoha to get to the people they want to consume. See, Jura, the de facto leader of the Shinju, is the biggest walking testament to this point. See, Jura simply wants to consume Himawari because Himawari has Naruto's chakra signature. However, when multiple people not named Himawari try to stop Jura, he says, "Hey guys, I'm not here for you, just let me eat Himawari." Now obviously this puts him at odds with all the people who love Himawari like Inojin and Shikadai, and this does lead to the inevitable demise of Inojin. And while this battle against Jura does pique Jura's interest in Shikadai, really all that comes out of the first squabble between humans and Shinju is the fact that Jura now wants to defeat Himawari and Boruto, and also maybe Shikadai. But the key takeaway from all of this is the fact that the Shinju don't seem particularly interested in all of the other ninja inside of Konoha. The Shinju want to consume the one person their body is telling them they're the most affectionate about. And anybody else who gets in the way, they don't actually want to kill because logically it makes no sense to them. They lack human emotion and connection, so they can't understand why other people would stick up against a greater foe for somebody they love. And therefore, if Jura, the leader of the Shinju, and therefore probably the most developed mentally Shinju, doesn't want to kill or destroy people or things outside of the purview of the one person he wants to consume, then the idea that the entirety of Konoha would be destroyed in a scuffle with the Shinju just doesn't make that much sense to me. See, here's the thing. Obviously, giant battles have taken place inside of Konoha. Konoha Crush, the Pain Arc, so on and so forth. However, all but immediately in Boruto, it's been established that the Boruto ninja are going to try and take any and all fighting away from Konoha. See, while Sarada and Tidari did duke it out in the mean streets of Konoha, Shikadai, Inojin, Chocho, and Himawari flew far out of Konoha to draw Jura away from populated city centers. And considering the fact that the majority of the important people in Boruto do have the ability to fly, like Kawaki, Ada, and Boruto, who are all some of the key targets of the Shinju, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to me if the battle against these Shinju and the people they're trying to consume took place inside Konoha. And even if it did, like we've already stated, it's not like the Shinju would actively be trying to destroy Konoha. Well, obviously, destruction would ensue with the battle. I can't say with any certainty that that level of destruction would reach the level that we see in Chapter 1 or Episode 1 of Boruto, unless for some reason all 5 battles against humans and Shinju were happening inside of Konoha. Now, obviously, this way of thinking doesn't leave much room for the idea that the Shinju could mentally develop. With time, the Shinju could obviously realize, hey, you know what? Maybe if we just take a bunch of people in Konoha hostage, everybody we want to consume will be forced to come to us. Mental growth for the Shinju is something that appears to be happening the more time they spend fighting or interacting with humans. But I can't even necessarily see that outcome coming to pass, mostly because of the fact that a lot of the key characters in Boruto in terms of power scaling align on the side of Boruto. And when you tie into the fact that Boruto also has the top political figure in all of Konoha swinging for his team, the idea that the human front won't be even slightly unified in the battle against the Shinju seems slightly unlikely. See, obviously in the last video we put out, we stated that something's probably gonna have to happen to Shikamaru, as Boruto having Mitsuki, Sarada, Sumire, maybe Amado, Shikamaru, and Ino basically means he's not exiled from Konoha. And so long as Boruto has the Hokage of Konoha on his side, his exile doesn't hold that much weight. And thus I theorize that in Chapter 14, Kawaki's doubts about Shikamaru's allegiances to him and Konoha, at least so far as Kawaki sees, will not only be confirmed, but also Kawaki will make an active move against Shikamaru, who will most likely try to stay Boruto's execution at the hands of the elders. And when it really boils down to it, this kind of needs to happen. See, because if Shikamaru is able to convince everybody that Boruto's actually one of the good guys, then the human front, at least on the side of Konoha, becomes unified. And a unified human front stands a better than good chance against the Shinju. Boruto's already established that he can basically one-shot a Shinju so long as he has enough time to channel the Earth's energy through his feet. Tie this into the fact that Sarada was able to dodge Hidari's attacks and land a fatal blow without the usage of her MS. And yeah, while the Shinju on an individual level are way more powerful than most of the characters in Boruto, if all of the most important and most powerful characters in Boruto came together in a unified front, they'd beat the Shinju rather easily. And thus that can't really really happened. And that's why I theorized in our last video that chapter 14 is going to be about the split of Team Boruto and Team Kawaki. And these split fronts, which will both have individual characters that the Shinju are targeting, will have difficulty battling against the Shinju. Now, while that could technically lead to the destruction of Konoha, especially in the case of Team Kawaki, who hold much less love for Konoha and all of its inhabitants, somewhat ironically, the only two Shinju that would be interested on people who would fall on Team Kawaki would be the Bug and Moegi Shinju, as Ada and Konohamaru would undoubtedly fall on the side of Team Kawaki, leaving Jura and Hidari to target Team Boruto. And that's assuming that Himawari ends up on Team Boruto, which is very much still to be seen. Now, in this circumstance, hypothetically, the Shinju could destroy Konoha. But still, once again, at the level of destruction that we saw from the Konoha that Boruto and Kawaki were standing above, I just can't imagine the Shinju doing all that. So this leaves us with the giant question of how is Konoha destroyed? Is it Amado? Is it Shibai? Well, yeah, I would say that either of them is a substantially more likely case than the Shinju. Like I've said multiple times, I believe the Shinju are going to be the first half of Part 2's villains. Characters who, like the Akatsuki, are supposed to set us up for the real final villain of this story, which, much like Naruto, will be a combination of some big scary alien and Kawaki / Sasuke. So some of you are probably thinking, well, then the answer seems somewhat obvious, right? There's a giant battle that happens in Konoha against Amado or Shibai that both Boruto and Kawaki are fighting on the side of good against. And thus this unified human front uses all of their collective Shinjutsu and other powers to defeat either Shibai or Amado, or both of them. Who knows? And then at the end of that fight, much like at the end of Naruto Shippuden, Kawaki and Boruto finally have their face-off. As now the Kawaki has eliminated the literal god of Otsutsuki, the only Otsutsuki he has left to eliminate would be Boruto. Yes, that could work. Well, I'm not gonna sit here and say that Kishimoto definitely hasn't been writing Naruto 2.0 with Boruto, as a lot of the storytelling beats very closely resemble storytelling beats that happen around this time in Naruto. Kishimoto has prided himself on trying to separate Boruto as a story from Naruto. And therefore, if the story ends with a giant unified battle against a crazy strong bad guy that ends with two pseudo brothers battling it out to rejoin their family, that's not gonna be a great look for Kishimoto. Like, yeah, did it work the first time? Absolutely. And would people complain about it the second time? Maybe not that much. But if the story you're trying to differentiate from your original IP ends in the exact same way as your original IP, that's not a fantastic look for your creativity. But so far as it goes with the information we currently have, that does kind of seem like the most likely conclusion. Because when it really boils down to it, if Boruto and Kawaki's battle isn't the last fight of the manga, it should at least be the second to last fight of the manga. Either after defeating the biggest final bad, they should have their big final fight, or their big final fight should be interrupted by the biggest final bad. And like I said, since putting their squabble at the end of the manga would literally just kind of be Naruto 2.0, I'd reckon their squabble gets interrupted. But if we're going with that line of thinking, that means that something prior to their squabble had to destroy Konoha. And that's where this explanation runs into problems, and that's the issue. Any and all explanation that you try to make using the information we have from Boruto to explain how Konoha got destroyed and how Boruto and Kawaki end up on those destroyed Hokage faces doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or narratively is kind of boring and flat. Now, obviously, you can re-inject the idea of code into this manga and say, oh, maybe some non-Shinju entity destroyed Konoha. But that doesn't work because Code got a one-shot by Boruto. Even if Code brought an entire army of Claw Grimes, the Claw Grimes are like high Jonin level. That'd be like if Madara was revealed as the final villain of Naruto, and Naruto one-shot him, and then he ran away for a little bit, made no changes, came back with an army of White Zetsu, and was like, hey, the fourth great Shinobi World War is on. We wouldn't necessarily be afraid of him. We know how the battle between him and the main character is gonna go down. And thus I think there is a real, legitimate possibility that we'll never know how Konoha is destroyed, because it won't happen. See, think about what we're trying to avoid here. We're trying to avoid the active destruction of Konoha, what is kind of the entire world to a lot of people. And with the level of destruction seen in Konoha in Chapter 1 and Episode 1, we can assume that hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of people are dead. And while we've definitely seen the entirety of Konoha's population brought back to life before, not only would doing that again be super lame, but also that would imply that everybody would have had to been killed by a Rinnegan user. So maybe one of of the Shinju. And then at that point, we're just running the pain assault back. And therefore, what if in actuality, when the 10 paths was revealed in chapter 13, it was a narrative way for Kishimoto to write himself out of the constraints that were placed on him by a different writer? See, think about what we've already learned about 10 paths. That Kashin Koji has access to all of the possible futures. He is able to see every possible future that could ever happen. Some futures, which involved Naruto losing in his fight against Ishiki, and Ishiki turning the entire world into a chakra fruit. Other futures that allowed for Kawaki and Boruto to fight on top of the Hokage's head prior to the time skip that led to Boruto's subsequent defeat, and then Kawaki's subsequent defeat at the hand of Code. But think about that. It's already been told to us that we've narrowly avoided a future where Kawaki and Boruto had to fight on top of the Hokage's heads, because that future brought the destruction of the world. See, listen, well, obviously the 10 paths only allows for Kashin Koji to see all possible futures and not pick which one he wants to go to. A future where Konoha is destroyed doesn't necessarily seem like a future that Kashin Koji or Boruto would want, even if it is the only future where the world isn't turned into a chakra fruit. But I believe that Kishimoto was trying to tell us something in chapter 13, showing us that, oh, with the power of the 10 paths, we were able to narrowly avoid a future where Kawaki and Boruto were forced to fight. And as we all know, or maybe we don't all know, but some of us know, Kishimoto did not write the first 52 chapters of Boruto. See, Kishimoto wanted to go write other manga outside of the Naruto IP, and so he handed Boruto off to his two assistants, Ukyo Kodachi, who wrote Boruto the movie, and Ikimoto, who we assigned to draw Boruto. However, because of Boruto's poor reception, Kishimoto decided to retake the helm at chapter 52, and the first thing he did was kill Kurama. And since then, there has been a massive narrative and tonal shift in Boruto. It has not only gotten better, but it has gotten more serious, and it's also ignored a lot of the things that happened in the early days of Boruto. And that's kind of the key takeaway here. Chapters 52 to 80 of part 1 of Boruto and the first 13 chapters of Two Blue Vortex are a different beast entirely from the first 52 chapters of Boruto. And this is because Kishimoto saw his IP waning in popularity. However, if Kishimoto is trying to right the ship of his IP, why would he keep himself narratively constrained to an idea written by somebody who got fired from the Boruto project? See, yes, you can obviously say Kishimoto was producing on all of the chapters created from chapter 1 to 52. But for the first couple of chapters being released to Boruto, Kishimoto was also trying to release a new manga called Samurai 8. And thus to assume that he was as fully involved as Boruto as he could just doesn't seem all that accurate. And thus, if I was Kishimoto and I realized that my IP that I spent years turning into an absolute titan of industry was being misguided and miscreated by Ukyo Kodachi, sure, while I might have signed off on what he was trying to accomplish, it clearly wasn't working. So why would I constrain myself to the ending of the story that Kodachi decided for the story? Why wouldn't I instead, considering the fact that I'm changing pretty much everything about the story from the moment I step in, also decide for a new ending? And thus, with the reveal of the 10 paths, a new Shinjutsu that allows for the avoidance of unfavorable futures, why wouldn't we label the future where Konoha was destroyed and Boruto and Kawaki are entered into a deathmatch as one of the unfavorable ones? Kishimoto has no reason to keep himself in the box created by a man who got fired from this project. So if he doesn't want Boruto's story to follow the ending of Naruto's story to a literal T, he can just as easily say Boruto and Kawaki aren't going to have their final blowout on top of Konoha after the destruction of the world's most dangerous alien. And this could be evidenced by the fact that Boruto hasn't used the Jogan yet. See, while in the early parts of Boruto, the first 52 chapters, the Jogan seemed to be something that was going to become a huge part of the story. However, ever since Kishimoto took over, the idea of the Jogan coming forward as an ability has actually taken a pretty big step back. Now, while I would absolutely love a future where Boruto does get access to the Jogan and we figure out what its abilities are, I'm just saying that knowing everything that I do know about Boruto, and with the introduction of the 10 paths, I wouldn't be that surprised if Kishimoto used this Shinjutsu as a way to change the story in the way that he wants. It not only makes sense for Kishimoto from an executive producer standpoint, but also in universe, it makes a fair amount of sense. So I definitely wouldn't be surprised if we never see what happened in episode 1 or chapter 1. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Do you believe that this future will be avoided, or do you want this future to come to pass? And if you do want it to come to pass, how do you think it will happen? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I have to go be in a scumbag dad skit.